We've been waiting for a few days now for Nigel Farage to talk, and he's found himself still in the role of Trump's most ardent British apologist, backpedalling on remarks made by this supposed political lodestar. And this time he's distanced himself, albeit belatedly, from Donald Trump's scathing attacks on Zelensky, in which the president, that's the American president, has accused the Ukrainian president of being a dictator without elections and derided him as a modestly successful comedian who talked the American states of America into spending $350 billion on an unwinnable war. Farage's delayed response, in which he stated Zelensky is not a dictator and that Trump's words should be taken seriously but not literally, is characteristic of his approach to international politics. Loud proclamations of intent followed by convenient hedging when things become inconvenient. The gap between his declaration and his action, between his posturing as a political heavyweight and his actual influence, is glaring. Farage's political style has always been that of a provocateur who thrives on disruption. His Brexit crusade was built on grand promises of sovereignty and self-determination, yet hard work of implementation, when it arrived, he happily left to others while he retreated to his media career. Similarly, his return to frontline politics with Reform UK has been less about practical proposals and more about finding the next headline-grabbing issue to exploit. And so I'm not that surprised he was quiet for such a long time after Trump spoke. His handling of Trump's outburst fits this pattern, therefore, perfectly. Proffer support, delay addressing the complications, then perform rhetorical gymnastics to avoid alienating either side. This is the pattern we've seen before, particularly among populist leaders who make sweeping promises of change only to filch and flinch when faced with the feeble responsibility of making difficult choices. It's all fluke, and it's all flim-flam. And Trump himself exemplifies the same tendency. His support for Ukraine in 2019, followed by his refusal to provide further assistance in 2024, demonstrates the same fickle opportunism. When Farage fails to acknowledge his own responsibility and Trump's responsibility, this is a political model that has abandoned an ally mid-crisis, much like he's done with previous allies and policies when they no longer serve his interests, whether those are Trump's interests or Farage's interests. Just cut and run. Trump's claim that Ukraine started the war and his framing of Zelensky as an authoritarian betrays the influence of his increasingly pro-Russian advisors and allies. And while it's no surprise that Trump seeks to rewrite the narrative to suit his electoral prospects, it's telling that Farage, a man who relishes talking tough about Western sovereignty and security, can only muster a tepid correction. A more principled leader would have categorically denounced Trump's remarks rather than obfuscating them with the vague notion that his words are, well, serious but not literal. I'm not shallow. Well, I'm afraid on this particular level you are as shallow as tepid drained water. By contrast, and as slow, by contrast, British political leaders such as Starmer and even Kemi Badenoch and Davey responded swiftly and unequivocally, reaffirming support for Ukraine and rejecting Trump's absurd suggestion that wartime elections should be a priority. Even the Defense Secretary John Healey went so far as to compare Zelensky to Winston Churchill, emphasizing that suspending elections in wartime is a responsible and historically justified measure. Farage lingered in ambiguity before making his delayed statement from Washington. Where else? One of the most galling aspects of Farage's personal persona is his expectation that the public should be grateful for his supposed interventions, even when they amount to little more than self-serving grandstanding. His political rebrand with Reform UK, his critiques of government policy, his purported willingness to challenge Trump, all come with the expectation that his audience should applaud him for merely showing up to the conversation. Yet, as we see with the handling of Trump's Ukraine comments, Farage's interventions come too late to be meaningful, too weak to be influential. The crux of the issue is not just that Farage failed to immediately call out Trump's falsehoods. It's that even when he did so in a way that was deliberately ambiguous and deferential, So the question remains, if he's unwilling to challenge his closest ally on such a fundamental issue, why should we expect him to be a serious leader in any meaningful capacity? He's not there for us, he's there for Trump. He's Trump's little flag waver. The Farage-Trump dynamic is one of mirroring opportunism. Just as Trump has a history of abandoning allies and causes when they no longer suit him, so Farage too has made a career of walking away from the consequences of his own rhetoric. So the latest episode merely reinforces this pattern. In the end, Farage's attempts to balance his loyalty to Trump with his newfound position as reform's leader, and incidentally, now he's no longer the leader of a brand. He's actually now a leader of a proper political party. It reveals what has always been true. He's more interested in positioning himself as a populist icon than in actually making principled stands. And for those clinging to the cliff's edge, be it Ukrainians fighting for survival or even British voters who placed their faith in Farage's previous promises, the realization should be stark. This helping hand extended was never firm to begin with. It was limp. And the man offering it was never fully committed to pulling anybody up. The only thing Farage is committed to is pulling people off and saying, yes, I'm offering you my hand, and now I'm taking it away, and you should be very grateful that it was even there in the first place. And Trump says basically the same sort of thing. Just be grateful that I appeared and told everyone else to go away while you were clinging to that cliff edge. And now, I can't do anything. Who cares? At least I showed willing. Well, that's not help, is it? That's hindrance. That's getting in the way. And that's all about him, and it's not about the victim who's hanging from the ledge. We must think about the victim, we must think about the Ukrainians, not about Trump, not about Farage. These are insignificant pygmies on the world stage, and eventually people are going to realize that.